horizon are you now?
On the 325 degree lag, we are VMC, over.
We checked that. 609 report intercepting the west leg inbound.
Roger, will do.
At night, you watch them taxiing in the dark, the jets and the prop jets. Their destination, anywhere in the world. And it all seems very natural and easy. Because this is 1959, Canada's 50th anniversary of powered flight. For Canada, the jet age didn't begin till 1945. The end of the war meant many things to many people. A challenge, a new start, a question mark where a lot of them had expected answers. Wartime demands had dotted Canada with airports, had taught thousands to fly, and developed tastes for travel. In machine shops and factories, it had built up manpower with new skills. In 1945, the question was, what now? How could aviation maintain the pace? And what would happen if it didn't? One of the men concerned with finding an answer was the Director of Civil Aviation, Mr. J.R.K. Main.
At the end of the war, we had a number of problems, many of which are still with us. Some of them, of course, were easily resolved. Thousands of properly trained and enthusiastic pilots were coming back to Canada, anxious to fly, and every effort was made to encourage them to get into the aviation business. So we had a surplus of pilots, and what we thought was a surplus of airports and of buildings and other equipment. The pilots, those of them who were lucky enough or tough enough to stay in the aviation business, are in it now in a big way. The airports soon proved themselves to be insufficient, both in numbers and in size. And the buildings, also we are finding now, were quite quickly found to be inadequate for the same reason. Today, we are chasing the problem of not being able to keep up with the tremendous advance that has taken place in aviation, both in volume, that is the amount of flying, because it has doubled about every 5 years, and because new breakthroughs have occurred in the technical field. It's true the jet was being developed at the end of the war. Now the jet as a civil aircraft is an accomplished fact. It is coming over the horizon with a tremendous zoom and is right upon us. And it imposes problems involving all these new techniques of which it is a part that we are having a fearful problem in keeping up with. We're not alone in this. The people who are operating the aircraft and purchasing them are also faced with these problems. We're all in the same boat or the same plane.
Just as the Department of Transport would have to plan airports and airways for jets not yet designed, manufacturers had to ask themselves, what will the shape of the future be? In a fighter, how fast is fast enough? What are the stresses of supersonic flight? What is the advent of the jet engine going to mean? jet engine was a breakthrough into a new simplicity. No propeller, no carburetor, no dozens of moving parts to increase the danger of breakage during flight. Instead, high-speed turbines drew air directly through the intakes and spewed it out, superheated, to drive the machine through the air. This was the CF-100, or Canuck, the first jet fighter of entirely Canadian construction and design. With the military acceptance of the CF-100, Air Force and industry were keeping in step with aviation developments in other countries of the world. Development for defense was only one side of aviation. Months earlier, and within a few weeks of Britain's Comet flights, the Avro Jetliner passed its test flights at Toronto. It was Canada's first pure jet and designed for civilian use. But despite its possibilities, it was never to go into production. The Korean War of 1950 put renewed emphasis on the airplane's military role. 426 Squadron began and completed the Tokyo airlift. 22 RCAF officers saw action with the USAF. But perhaps more important still was the way in which Korea highlighted Canada's new international responsibilities. Under the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the RCAF began to train air crews for NATO member nations. In May 1951, the first NATO students graduated from Air Navigation School at Summerside, and the RCAF itself was on the increase. At Winnipeg, number 14 group was formed to supervise new schools that had been opened on the prairies. On the Atlantic coast, RCAF reconnaissance squadrons were working out new techniques of defense. For the first time in what was officially a period of peace, air defense was to extend far beyond Canadian coasts. With the acquisition of the aircraft carrier Bonaventure, the Royal Canadian Navy was keeping abreast of the latest developments in naval aviation.
15-14 rocket.
Tracker aircraft flew anti-submarine patrols. Overhead, man-sheet jets provided fighter cover. But air defense was to move still farther afield. In August 1952, an RCAF Air Division headquarters was set up in France. And in September, 3 squadrons of No. 2 Fighter Wing leapfrogged the Atlantic to their new base at Groton Camp. For the first time since 1946, RCAF squadrons were operating from the mainland of Europe. With the arrival of 2 more wings at Zweibrücken and Baden-Solingen in Germany, Canada's air contribution to the integrated forces of NATO was complete. What about the aviation industry? Within Canadian factories, would changes in equipment and technique be as radical as changes in the air? In some ways, they were even more so. Size was only one factor. Behind the successful building and testing of aircraft stood new complexes of electronic devices, computing machines, information recording machines, a whole new technology designed to speed up production while diminishing the danger of human mistakes. Within the fuselage of the Canadair-built Argus was proof, if proof were needed, that Canadian manufacturers can handle size and power. But bigger planes require bigger runways, better lighting systems, more and bigger airports. Would the old facilities be good enough? What new problems would the Argus pose for the Federal Department of Transport?
The big problem facing DOT today is that the problem itself is changing daily. Old equipment is becoming obsolete. Techniques that were current last year are not satisfactory today. The organization that was satisfactory to meet these requirements is inadequate. So we have to change our organization, our techniques, our equipment, and sometimes our whole philosophy of thinking in order to change, in order to provide a system that will meet the requirements of the jet aircraft, which calls for split-second operation all the way down the line if it is to be efficiently run.
The old days of $50 an hour operating costs are gone. To operate today's airliners costs in the neighborhood of $2,000 an hour. And delays on the ground or in the air mean serious financial loss. Whatever their power source, piston, turboprop, or pure jet, the big planes demand better ground facilities, rely more on electronics, and require more specialization in both civilian and military fields. But the big plane can't do everything. The bush has kept the small plane king, just as the mountains have highlighted the versatility of the helicopter.
The biggest thing in mountain landings is that the helicopters of today haven't got any margin of power to spare. Altitude reduces it still further, and then coupled with that, you have a rise in temperature which thins the air out still further. And then you have the downdrafts and the updrafts, and the one danger is running out of sky.
advent of nuclear weapons and ultra-long-range aircraft among the nations of the world, a new emphasis was thrown upon the North. Under a joint program of Canada and the United States, triple lines of radar stations were constructed from coast to coast. Their function, to provide warning against possible air attack. But the North was not without civilian activity. Frobisher Bay, once a lonely outpost, suddenly became the center of attention as a potential refueling base for world airlines. As more and more international airlines contemplated polar routes, northern flying was coming of age. At remote bases like Resolute and Alert, the Air Force flew in supplies. But the job of building and maintaining airports, providing air and ground facilities and personnel, was civilian. Through the Department of Transport's meteorological experts and a growing network of communications, northern flyers are depending less and less on luck. When a plane does go down, it immediately sets in action the RCAF Search and Rescue Organization. Interlocking with search-rescue machinery are facilities of the Radar Warning Line, Ground Observer Corps, and units specially trained for rescue work. Rescue, once largely seat-of-the-pants flying and luck, has become a science. From Wallace Turnbull's first aeronautical wind tunnel has grown a complex science of aeronautical research, concerned as much with the man at the controls as it is with the machine. Through aviation medicine comes the knowledge enabling men to cope with the stresses of flight, to handle fighters the size of World War II bombers, and traveling at twice the speed of sound.
Well, the advent of jets naturally opens up a whole new field of power units. But personally, there are many disadvantages still in the jet engine for utility aircraft. For high-speed, long-range aircraft, there's no doubt in the world that, and military aircraft in general, there's no doubt at all that the jet engine is the obvious answer. But for the smaller airplane, where only 400 or 500 horsepower is needed, and which is going to fly under conditions of daylight, mostly, contact, which means within sight of the ground, and at speeds of 100 and 150 miles an hour, the power is too great in most of the jet engines. And the piston engine is a good, reliable, serviceable unit, which I think will last for many years yet.
Punch Dickens has seen aviation grow from early bush flying to the jet. It was a contrast in keeping with the age that in the midst of the jet boom, a small plane should become big business. For years, bush pilots had been looking for a machine to meet their particular needs. Short takeoff, high rate of climb, good payload. Something easy to handle and economic to maintain. In the Beaver, designed around the bush pilot's own recommendations, de Havilland Aircraft thought it had the answer. The company was Wright, and the success of the Beaver pointed up two important facts. The Canadian frontiers still had real and special needs, and as more of these small planes reached foreign markets, commercial aviation was becoming international. In Asia, Europe, and South America, the second half of the 20th century would see Canadian planes at work. In Pakistan, under Colombo Plan aid, a Toronto company completed an air survey of the country. In less than 25 years, from mapping the Canadian wilderness to air surveys halfway around the world. 5,000 air miles from Vancouver lies Tokyo, now a routine stop on Canadian Pacific Airlines' eastern runs. But Canadian Pacific flights to the Orient and TCA's European service were soon matched by foreign traffic coming into Canada. Traffic that in 1947 added a new word to aviation's vocabulary, ICAO. Today's International Civil Aviation Organization, of some 73 member nations, works out in Montreal aviation standards for the world. In 1959, a Canadian, Mr. R.M. MacDonald, was named to be Secretary General.
One of its objectives is to meet the needs of the peoples of the world for safe, regular, efficient, and economical air transport. Now, that's a pretty comprehensive statement of aims, and it requires a great deal of international cooperation. Who's going to provide the technical services, such as weather reports and radio? Who's going to pay for all this? Who's going to set the safety standards? On what terms can airports be used? All these things require a great deal of international discussion. If every nation were to set up its own system and its own requirements and its own regulations, you'd have a thicket of regulations so dense and so complicated that international flying would become extremely difficult. As it is, the nations come together in the International Civil Aviation Organization and by careful and patient discussion work out agreements in all these fields. The framework is the same for all and everyone benefits from it.
Just as ICAO faces international problems, in Canada, the Department of Transport must continue building and planning ahead to keep up with the jet age.
5, hour, change 119.7, good evening. Canada 3.
New airports and new terminal buildings, new telecommunications and weather services in the north, surveillance radar for major airports, studies of the jet stream, and along with the new, the old but ever-present problems of safety, licensing, proper control. In a field where sportsmen and executive, as well as airline passengers, have taken for granted a conquest that is barely 50 years old.
40, just west of the field, and right.
Jet 329, start to Montreal, made across at 11,000, report.
Peter Montreal Tower, ready, immediate takeoff.
XLP is not Montreal Tower, Wheeler 950. Speak to the Viscount and get through it.
Wheeler 950 Montreal Tower, runway 28, the wind is 29.
This is Aviation, 1959. Next year, newer, faster planes will ride the electronic highways of the air. And yet, as dusk falls over city airports, statistics seem less important than the simple fact of flight.
Continue number 1. Man 77 Delta, you are off at 24.
The one time of the outside.
And local 404, additional calls from Southwest VFR, last report at Valleyfield. What's your report proceeding? LDD, Samuel Tower, there is man goes down, traffic is just down. Adjourn, wind check is 280, variable 20, gusting 35.
279, take position in front of the company has been advised.
At night, you watch them landing in the dark. Domestic, international, the local flights, and planes from halfway around the world. It all seems very natural and easy. 1959, 50th anniversary of powered flight.